of Islam. It is not me, it is not my colleagues on this side.
Point of information on that point. If Islam and Muslims are responsible for the Muslim patrols...
I'm not finished. I'm not, no, I'm not. I mean, let me speak on. But the point is that it is not I or my fellow debaters on this side who are causing fear of Islam. It is the actions of Muslims that are causing fear of Islam. That is the real world. Like the command to beat her. I've seen Muslim women... I didn't stand up for you.
You're allowed to.
Well, I didn't. So if you could just have it... But I knew this would happen. I knew this would happen, by the way. I knew this would happen. What I'm saying is completely controversial and will be booed and shouted down, and I have no doubt my colleagues the same. I knew this would happen. You say anything negative, you'll get the boos. I'm actually...
Most politicians, when they get near this topic, develop a sudden interest in their shoelaces. They hedge, sugarcoat, and reach for the nearest euphemism and hold on tight. Anne-Marie Waters does none of that. She walks straight at the thing everyone else is walking around. And what she says in this speech is either the most honest assessment of a civilizational problem you'll hear from a British political figure, or the most controversial one, possibly both at once. Let's start with her Oxford Union address, long before this whole bag of migrant worms blew up in our faces.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone can hear me. How to respond to a lot of this? First of all, on the bar, you said you admitted yourself that the bar had been set quite high. I would suggest, though, that the burden of proof is on the proposer rather than on us. It quite clearly says Islam is a religion of peace. I suggest you prove it. We've also been told here tonight when we opened, that this debate must take place in the real world. Well, absolutely, yes, it must. It must take place in the real world. And I will describe what Islam is doing in the real world. We can sit and we can debate theocracy day in, day out. We will never agree. We can debate, is there a God, isn't there a God, is the Quran real, isn't it? None of it actually matters. What matters is what happens in the real world, as my opponent quite rightly said. My side of the argument is regularly told that we've heard it again tonight, we were described somewhat as hate. We were told that we are demonizing Islam, whipping up fear of Islam. Not the first time I've been accused of this, probably won't be the last. But let me just say, and let's take this into the real world as we've been advised to do, let me tell you what actually whips up fears of Islam.
Anne opens with a framing that cuts through immediately. This isn't about race. It was never about race. Islam is an idea, a set of propositions about how human beings should live, how governments should operate, how women should be treated, how non-believers should be regarded. And ideas, unlike ethnicities, are subject to scrutiny. The moment that distinction gets blurred, which unfortunately it does more often than not, strategically and repeatedly, the conversation becomes impossible to have honestly. Then she names the thing British political culture has spent years refusing to name directly. Even Mehdi Hassan, there present, tried every known trick in the book against her. Watch how she handles him.
9/11, the London Underground bombings, Madrid, Mumbai, Mali, Bali, northern Nigeria, Sudan, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, Pakistan, death for apostasy, death for blasphemy, death for adultery, death for homosexuality, gender segregation, gender discrimination, unequal testimony between men and women in legal proceedings, child marriage, amputations, beheadings, imprisonment for being raped, anti-Semitism, burqas, execution, as I've said, for this, that and the other, the slaughter of Theo van Gogh on the streets of Amsterdam, death threats on the streets of London, butcher those who insult Islam, Muslim patrols in East London telling people they are entering Sharia-controlled zones, polygamous marriages, marriage not requiring the consent of the bride. is what causes fear of Islam. It is not me, it is not my colleagues on this side.
Point of information on that point. If Islam and Muslims are responsible for the Muslim patrols...
I'm not finished. I'm not. I mean, let me speak on. But the point is that it is not I or my fellow debaters on this side who are causing fear of Islam. It is the actions of Muslims that are causing fear of Islam. That is the real world. That is where we actually live. Then we'll be told that this is just the extreme fringe of Islam. Well, let me have a look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, the custodian of its holy sites. In Saudi Arabia, a woman is not allowed to drive. She is not allowed to leave the house without a mahram. She is not allowed to vote, although they've been incredibly generous by allowing some votes in the next elections.
The Quran contains passages that endorse violence against unbelievers and mandate the subjugation of women. She's not paraphrasing hostile critics, she's citing the text. And her argument is simple. If those passages are driving behaviour, then the behaviour cannot be addressed without addressing the passages. Treating the symptom while protecting the source isn't compassion. It's avoidance with better PR.
This is apparently the extreme fringe of people are executed for blasphemy, executed for apostasy. In Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam, we'll be told that's the extreme fringe of Islam. No, it is not. Calling Saudi Arabia the extreme fringe of Islam is like calling the Vatican the extreme fringe of Catholicism. Sorry, it just doesn't work. Then we'll be told that we've misunderstood. Violent Muslims have misunderstood. Saudi Arabia has misunderstood. Iran, which stones people to death for adultery, has misunderstood. Yemen, which marries children at the age of 9, has misunderstood. Has there ever been a more spectacularly misunderstood religion than Islam? It seems that these nations who apply it as their laws, nations which have the Quran as their constitution, innumerable nations, where there is no free speech, where there is no freedom of religion, they've all got it wrong. They've all got it wrong. It's quite a spectacularly misunderstood religion.
What Waters adds is the connective tissue that official reports tend to shy away from. The perpetrators in Rotherham, Telford, Rochdale, and across the north of England weren't simply criminals who happened to be Muslim. Many of them explicitly framed their victims, young, white, non-Muslim girls, as morally available precisely because of what they believed.
There's just so much. I'm constantly told as well that I need to respect Islam. I'm never quite given a good enough reason why. I am under no greater obligation to respect Islam than I am any other beliefs. I'm under no more obligation to respect a woman oppressed in the name of Islam than if she is oppressed by the BNP or anyone else. I am under no obligation to make compromises with an ideology I simply don't see as peaceful. Why don't I see it as peaceful? Because of the evidence. If I look around the world and I see the countries where Islam calls the shots, all I see is brutality and violence imposed by the state. We were told that peace is not just the absence of violence but the presence of justice. Absolutely. I do not see how in a nation where, as the only woman here, I have some particular issues with the way women are treated in Islamic states. Now you can argue that they've got it wrong. Tell them that, because they seem to think that's what it is.
She lays it bare without apology. And the fact that saying it still requires courage in 2024 is, in itself, the strongest argument for its legitimacy. Then she turns to Sharia courts operating inside Britain, and this is where the gloves come off.
Yes, I mean, there's so much to say about it, but is there a peaceful Islam? Yes, there is. It's in the hearts of peaceful Muslims. Unfortunately, though, there's also a rather more objective Islam, and peaceful Muslims have to do some really rather creative interpretation. Like the command to beat her. I've seen Muslim women. I didn't stand up for you.
You're allowed to.
Well, I didn't. So if you could just have a bit. I knew this would happen. I knew this would happen, by the way. I knew this would happen. What I'm saying is completely controversial and will be booed and shouted down, and I have no doubt my colleagues the same. I knew this would happen. You say anything negative, you'll get the boos. I'm actually going to leave it there. But I will finish just by saying this. There are hundreds of millions of peaceful Muslims. That is a fact. But that does not mean that Islam itself is peaceful. Peaceful Muslims interpret verses of the Quran so almost beyond recognition.
These aren't informal community mediation services. They're institutions applying a parallel legal framework, one that, in its handling of divorce, inheritance and child custody, produces systematically worse outcomes for women than the civil law those women are theoretically entitled to. And they operate, largely unchallenged, because the institutions responsible for civil law have decided that intervention would be culturally insensitive. The women inside those systems are most likely British citizens. They have rights under British law. The question Waters keeps returning to is why those rights are being treated as optional depending on which community you belong to.
Like the command to beat her. It's there in the Quran, and I've seen Muslim women try to dance around it. They put words in there that simply aren't there. That's what it says. It says beat her. And in the countries where the Quran calls the shots, that is exactly what they do. This is not peace. This is not justice. Islam is not a religion of peace, as the evidence.
Europe's foundational values, such as free expression, equal rights, the rule of secular law over religious authority, did not arrive fully formed. They were fought for, bled for, and encoded in legal systems through centuries of conflict between church power and individual liberty. The Enlightenment wasn't an intellectual exercise. It was a political revolution against theocracy. So, importing a theocratic framework at scale, and then refusing to examine it because examination might seem unwelcoming, is not tolerance, but the slow erosion of exactly the foundations that make tolerance possible in the first place. But the next time Anne-Marie Waters addressed this issue, she didn't just make the argument more personal, she made it impossible to dismiss. Take a look at what happened when she brought the receipts.
Ahmed and Anne-Marie Waters, thank you for joining me this evening. Okay, let's start with you. I mean, we heard from the Home Office Minister, Jeremy Browne, in Peter's report there. Is he right? Is it time for a full national debate about wearing a face veil in public in the UK?
Well, firstly, I think the issue has been overblown by Jeremy Browne. I don't think we need a national debate.
Why not?
I think it's very simple. I think in Britain, women and men are free to choose what they want to wear, and we have that freedom to do that, and we've got the freedom to express our religious and cultural beliefs in any way that we want to, and I think that should stand.
What do you think, Anne-Marie?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be clear what we're talking about. This isn't about telling people what they can or cannot wear. This is about concealing identity. And while the National Secular Society doesn't call for a blanket ban on this, there have to be circumstances where it's just not appropriate and shouldn't be permitted. And one of those has to be a defendant in a criminal trial. At any stage during the trial,
I think
they
Jeremy
should have their face seen.
Okay.
And the right for freedom of expression and freedom of religion is not an absolute right, it's a qualified right.
However, that's
and there are
not
other
what Jeremy...
considerations.
The statistics she opens with are not from fringe sources. They're from peer-reviewed academic research, polling conducted by mainstream organisations, and government-commissioned reports. And they describe something that the commentariat has been reluctant to say plainly, that significant portions of British Muslim communities hold views on homosexuality, on apostasy, on the role of women in public life, that are not compatible with the legal and cultural framework of the country they live in.
But Nick Clegg actually has added to the debate today because he supports a woman's right to wear a niqab, but he says it shouldn't happen in a classroom, it shouldn't happen in, for example, going through airport security. And of course, we've got this court case at the moment as well. Do you agree that there are certain areas wherever we are in public places that it isn't appropriate to wear one?
There are, of course, going to be exemptions.
So you do agree on that point?
Yes, and and nobody should be forced to wear a headscarf or a niqab. Nobody should be forced to do anything that they don't want to do. But in that same way, I think if we are concerned about young women who are potentially being forced to wear a niqab, having a blanket ban on it is not going to address that. Those young women come from complex social situations and they need social and pastoral means to address those issues. A ban won't address those very, very complex issues at all. All it would do is silence those young women even further.
Anne-Marie, why do you believe that the veil represents segregation or the repression of women?
Well, I mean, if you look at the countries where it is compulsory, there is no choice. And even in this country, there isn't a lot of choice. I mean, we have schools in this country, and not universities or colleges, but schools where 11, 12-year-old girls, this is the compulsory uniform. And what Jeremy Brown is calling for, he's not calling for a ban, he's calling for a debate.
Right.
And we have to have that, and we have to identify that there are thousands of women in this country who are being forced to wear it.
This is not a comfortable sentence to say. It is also not a controversial finding. The ICM poll, the Policy Exchange research, the Channel 4 survey all point in the same direction. The argument about whether these findings should be discussed, rather than the findings themselves, is where the energy goes. Waters refuses that redirection. She stays on the numbers. The number that lands hardest, and she knows it, is the one on Sharia preference. A majority of British Muslims, in multiple surveys, expressed a desire to live under Sharia law in Britain, not abroad. Here, in a country whose legal system is built on the sovereignty of Parliament, the independence of judges, and the equal standing of every citizen regardless of faith.
Do you feel that, are you one of the ladies that Anne-Marie is talking about here?
No, not at all.
What do you say to her about this?
I wear the hijab obviously through my own choice, and I think if we're talking about the niqab, there are women who also wear the niqab through their own choice. Sure. And these women who I've met and who are my friends, they are very determined, strong, confident young women who are very articulate and very gregarious. I mean, after a few moments of speaking to them, you wouldn't think that their identity has been concealed or that they're suppressed in any shape or form.
Well, I mean, their identity is being concealed, their face is covered.
But it's their choice,
that's not
and maybe
up for
that's
debate.
the most important thing.
Well, fine. I mean, but let's talk a little bit more about the women who are being forced to wear it. And I think the idea that 11-year-olds having compulsory uniform is absolutely scandalous, and we need to address that.
And
that
Akila, 11, I mean, an 11-year-old girl, does she really know whether she wants to wear a full face veil or not at that age?
I agree. I mean, an 11-year-old being forced to wear a niqab is not right, and I think that needs to be looked into by the Department for Education and how they regulate independent schools. However, I think there are much more pertinent debates to be had. For example, on page 3, or for example.
Notice how she addresses the obvious objection directly. Of course, most Muslims are not violent. Of course, the overwhelming majority are peaceful people living ordinary lives. That isn't the argument, and she's not making it. The argument is about the ideas that a significant minority hold, the infrastructure those ideas operate through, and the institutional silence that allows that infrastructure to expand without scrutiny. This part is where she gets most specific and most pointed.
Lots and lots of tweets coming on this. This is from Kieran Anderson, both men actually. Banning women wearing veils is going too far. People wear it for religious reasons, for their faith. It's not hurting anybody. I mean, he's got a very good point, Anne-Marie. It's not hurting you, is it, if someone on the bus that you're on is wearing a niqab?
Well, it possibly does hurt people.
In what way?
It legitimises it, and it creates more pressure on girls to wear it. I mean, this conversation is always about women who want to wear it, and we ignore the women who don't. And I think we need to start looking at and supporting and standing up for the women who don't want to wear it.
One final one for you, if you don't mind. This is from Lee Charles, and the gentleman says, regardless of religion, it's in our nature to feel uncomfortable around anyone who covers their face. They should adapt to our culture. Do you think he's got a point? If you can't converse with someone because their face is covered, it makes you feel uncomfortable?
I don't necessarily agree with the niqab, but that does not give me the right to tell women what they can and cannot wear. It's a simple.
The Labour Party, in particular, has made a calculated decision to treat Muslim communities as a bloc vote to be retained rather than a constituency to be honestly engaged with. The consequence of that calculation, visible now in town halls, in parliamentary selections, in the internal culture of local Labour branches across northern England, is a party that has subordinated its stated commitment to women's rights, LGBT rights, and free expression to the electoral arithmetic of community politics.
To be banned? What do you think, Anne-Marie, in this country?
I'm glad there's a discussion going on.
Will it ever be banned? That was my question.
Anne names it directly. This is moral cowardice, dressed as political sensitivity. And the people paying the price for it are not sitting in Westminster. They're the women in Rotherham, the gay men in Tower Hamlets, the ex-Muslims who can't walk safely in their own neighbourhoods, The data doesn't lie, the silence around it does. Kindly drop your take below.